Hey everyone, in this video I'm going to show you how I made this cowl using my knitting machine in about an hour. Got the inspiration for this cowl over on Jess Makes a Mess. I'm going to leave a link to her video down below. Make sure you check that out. Mine's very similar. I have a little bit more rows because I didn't count, and I have my buttons a little bit differently, but I definitely watched her video and was inspired to make my own, so make sure you check her out. Let's get started making this cowl. All right, so the items we're going to need to make this cowl are our knitting machine. I'm going to be using the Loops and Thread knitting machine from Michaels. This is a 40 needle machine. I'm going to use Yarn Bee Rustic Romantic, which is one of my favorites. It works really well for this machine. It's swishy. Really like this stuff. You're going to need a little bit of scrap yarn too. We're going to do a couple rows of waist in the beginning and the end. I'm going to use some buttons. I'm not sure yet which buttons I'm going to put on my cowl. I'm really digging these chicken buttons. If I don't use them for the cowl, I'm going to have to find something to put them on because those are cute. Also going to need some scissors, crochet hook, and a yarn needle. All right, so the first thing that I'm going to do is cast on with my scrap yarn. I'm going to put the tail of the yarn down into the middle of the machine. And I'm going to start with the black needle, and I'm just going to start weaving around each needle, in front, behind, all the way until I get back to the beginning. All right, now that I'm back to the beginning, I'm going to put my yarn down into my yarn guide and make sure that it's in there all the way. And see my tension guide, I'm going to put my yarn into the middle tension slot. And I'm going to start cranking, and I'm going to go pretty slow for this first round, making sure that I'm not dropping any stitches. If I do drop any stitches, I'm going to start over from the very beginning. After this first row, I'm going to go ahead and go a little bit faster. I'm probably going to do 4 or 5 rows with the blue. I've done a couple of rows with the blue, and now I'm ready to switch over to my main color. So I'm going to snip off the end of the blue, and I'm just going to let that lay in the middle of the machine. I'm going to grab my main color, and I'm going to feed it into the guide, put it into the same tension slot, middle one. And at this point, you could just go ahead and start turning the handle slowly, but I like to use a clip. And I'm just going to take my scrap yarn and my new yarn, and I'm just going to clip them together. I find that helps me with this first row, that I don't drop any stitches. Of rows, and I felt like the tension was too tight. My machine was not wanting to crank very easily, so I have went ahead and adjusted the tension. Now I'm running it through that third slot, and I'm just going to keep going. I may end up doing the entire ball of yarn. I don't have a counter on this machine, so when I'm done, I'll go through and count and let you know exactly how many rows that I'm doing. So at this point, the cowl is starting to touch the table, so I need to clip it up. I like to use these Dollar Tree crafty clips, and I'm just going to roll it up, however, so that it's not touching the table as I knit. So I went through and I ended up knitting that entire ball of yarn. I got about 160 rows. I probably should have stopped sooner. I had my music playing and I just lost track. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to take my yarn and put that to the center. I'm going to take the scrap yarn and I'm going to clip those together. I always clip my 2 tails, and I'm going to knit probably 4 more rows of blue. going to trim the end with my very high-tech scissors. These are my daughter's from kindergarten. I'm gonna put the tail into the center, and now I'm just gonna crank until the piece falls off the needle. Project is off of the machine. I'm gonna go through and make sure that I don't have any drop stitches. If I do, this is the time when it needs to be fixed. And I actually did not have a single drop stitch. My machine really likes that yarn. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to close up my ends. And I know there's lots of videos, so I'm not going to go too much detail about how I do this, but I'm going to use my crochet hook, and I'm going to put the scrap yarn to the left-hand side. And I'm going to look at these stitches. You can see this top row. So there's the yarn. That top gray stitch is where I'm going to start. So I'm going to hold my work like this so that I have all of the top of those stitches there. I'm going to grab the first one. I'm going to pull it through. I'm going to grab the bottom one, pull it through. And I'm just going to continue in that pattern all the way to the end. I've gotten to the very end, I've just got this tail. I'm going to make a loop and pull that tail through, and then I'm going to go through and I'm going to remove the blue waste yarn. And we're left with a really nice smooth edge. I'm going to do the same thing to the other side. Now I've got both ends closed up, and there's a tail on each side. I'm going to use my yarn needle, and I'm going to hide that tail in between the layers. It's going to be real easy to tuck that in. And then I'm going to use a needle and thread, and I'm going to sew just a straight line. I'm just going to hand sew it along this edge and this edge. And I decided to go with my dark buttons, and I'm just going to sew 3 on, and I'll be right back. So this is how the cowl came out. I love the way that it lays. It's very comfortable. Sometimes with scarves, you really have to kind of mess with them, make them look nice, but this is just super simple. Really like it. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. See you on the next video.